Ladies and gentlemen, in this rapidly changing world, the traditional measures of success may not fit anymore. So, have you noticed the subtle yet profound how success is defined? And now let's together explore how these changes are reshaping and redefining success in modern era. I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Anil Viswanathan, Managing Director of Mondelez Kingdom, and answer for the new metrics of success.
Good morning, everyone. Xin chào. My name is Anil. I run the Mondelez Vietnam business, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Firstly, congratulations to the first round of winners for the customer experience category. Congratulations, some great work there. It's an interesting third session that we're going to have. A wonderful presentation by Binu, really inspiring work that Nestle is doing about creating shared brand value. And then a very interesting presentation from Ken and the conversation that Ken had about the retail media network. So something which is really quintessential, classical about bringing brand value, and something very 21st century, which is retail media. And what I'm trying to do is really possibly try and connect the two and build it back to the theme for today, which is purpose-driven leadership. Let me set the context first. And in many ways, what the previous discussion set up kind of sets the context very, very clearly for us. A lot of what I'm going to say you already know, especially in the first few slides. So humor me, I'm an old guy. Maybe a bit more relevant for people at the back who are listening in, maybe young practitioners, maybe those in the ecosystem, helping make media, brand, marketing plans. The context has changed, and we all know that the context has changed. There's a huge amount of content consumption, profusion of content, and every day we are bombarded by tons and tons and tons of ads. Here I thought, at least when I open my Grab app, I don't see ads. Now I was reminded that I see ads also on the Grab app. So that makes that 10,001 ads per day. That's the average, about 7,000 to 8,000 ads per day is what we are bombarded with. So imagine the probability of success that one ad could have in a day. Try your luck buying a battery on Lazada. 20916 items found. Profusion of choice is making brand trials, making a brand to succeed, the probability of success of a brand increasingly more difficult. For a brand to have repeated success, it's almost becoming an uncertainty. As we heard in the previous session, God forbid that you are participating in a platform where you don't have any data for yourself. You just have to hope and pray after putting in an ad whether it gets converted or not. You'll get a lot of data, but you don't know whether it works or not. The consumer journey, we heard about the consumer journey getting more and more complex. And we can see some very, very good, interesting examples of, again, new platforms disrupting the entire consumer journey. From the way that we typically built brands and classically thought about building our campaigns, from awareness to trials to repeats, it's all changing, converging, rapidly transforming. And what better example than TikTok Shop that has done this in the last, year and a half, 18 months? All at once. And again, the unpredictability of it, and which influencer will succeed, and how am I going to identify that that influencer is going to influence my brand, and the consumer is going to end up picking up my brand. So the journey is getting more complex. You all know this, right? The context has indeed changed. Attention is a massive challenge, we know that. More and more brands are coming in, more and more choices are being provided, more and more personalized choices are being provided, And we see all of that every day evening when we come back home and open up our Netflix accounts. You are getting suggested on what you need to consume. And pretty much time it works. And the consumer journey is no longer simple. So that's the context. And in that context, my conversation is a little bit more about what are we measuring in this context? And as I was reflecting upon the theme that I want to talk about today, I was, of course, coming back from the recent huge investment period of brands that we saw through TET. And we, of course, have started to see the analysis come through of what brands did at TET. And when I look at all the work and when I look at the massive amount of spending that the whole industry is doing, I'm just left to wonder, what are we measuring? And when you look at the industry, when I look at ourselves, when I look at our business, typically this is what we're measuring, right? You can give it fancy terms, some new age terms, different platforms call it different ways, but has the consumer seen my ad? Does he remember my brand? Did he try it? Is he repeating it? In order to kind of support that, what am I spending? Is it giving me the growth and is it giving me ROI? And in the context that I spoke about, my real reflection is that possibly what we are measuring is necessary but not sufficient, as our teachers told us in math class in school. Because impressions are getting less effective. Just by measuring impressions, just by measuring awareness, do we have the confidence that our brands are getting remembered, that our ads are getting remembered, and the ads are getting noticed? In the context of a very, very explosion of choice and number of brands being available, my reflection is that trial is transitory. There is nothing called just one trial. We cannot be happy or we cannot remain comforted that a brand has been tried once after a consumer has seen our ad, because it is transitory. Because consumer journeys are complex, the fact that he bought our brand the first time does not assure us that they're going to buy it the next time. It's interesting, in the retail media network conversation, there was a lot of interesting talk about clarity of the bottom of the funnel. Yes, the bottom of the funnel gives us a lot of clarity. But to whom? And at what cost? Of course, the platform owners are laughing all the way to the bank, aren't they? And we've seen this story play out again and again and again. So as classic, and this is possibly talking to the more traditional brand owners here, are you not realizing that you're losing control of the bottom of the funnel? And yes, you're looking at the value that you're extracting out of the money that you invest. But please remember that in the cycle that we are in, and the cycle is closing fast, it is the denominator that is driving the ROI, not the numerator. Sale by cost. Return on investment. The cost is going down because there's a greater choice, there's a lot of funding, and one platform is moving to another as funding is moving from one platform to another. And we're seeing this story go again and again and again. So that's really the provocation for traditional brand owners here, marketers, media planners, agency partners. Are we sure that we want to be happy measuring awareness, trials, and repeats? Are we sure we just want to give a media plan with a budget and approved based on an ROI or an ROS, and is that sufficient? My argument is that in today's day and age, it is not sufficient. And the example that you just heard of a consumer seeing a Loteria ad in the Grab app and going ahead and buying something from Loteria and transacting with Loteria is so transitory that how are you going to manage on a month-in, month-out basis? Where am I going to spend the money on the brand Loteria? And how am I going to create sustainable success for the brand? So I think the important point, and I think Ken said it really, really well, it was always a problem, but I think my sense is it's getting even and even more difficult on attribution. And it's been about 18 months since I moved in my journey from being a CMO to a CEO. When I was a CMO, I always used to worry, why is my boss not happy? He keeps telling me your marketing is not delivering. I said, I'm showing all the data, he doesn't understand. Now when I drive the business, I'm wearing the business hat and asking, are you sure your marketing is driving? And my partner is sitting out here and he says, yeah, I get that question quite often. Because attribution is getting more and more difficult. Because we can no longer be confident that because my ad is being seen, because my brand is being preferred, I will deliver the business results this month. We are living in a quarter-to-quarter world. We are living in a world where there is a profusion of brands. We are faced with possibly many, many large brands across the world are facing a long tail, are seeing a story of market share loss. And in the context of market share loss and sustaining volume growth, attribution is getting tougher. I think the second observation that I am seeing is the moment attribution gets tougher, silos get stronger. The media manager says, you give me the budget, I delivered. I delivered, look at the reach that I delivered. The brand manager says, I have tested the ad, it's working. And there's a marketing plan that works. So why is it not? So there's a fear that the moment we start thinking about attribution and not think holistically, we get into silos of each of us trying to defend the parts that we are controlling and not looking at the overall problem. So what's my provocation? What's my suggestion? What's my thinking? It's not that I have all the answers, by the way. I'm part of the problem. 4 changes that I recommend, 4 changes that seems to be at least triggering us in the right direction. We have at least empirical data that it's working. Firstly, to say that in today's day and age, it's no longer enough to measure awareness. It's no longer enough to measure salience. We need to move from salience to engagement. And there are many ways of measuring engagement. Possibly in some cases there are surrogate measures, may not be direct measures. In some cases there are direct measures as well. But the provocation is that we need the consumer to engage, which means we should be able to understand that he or she is not observing an ad in a passive way, but responding, taking action. And that action could be a bottom of funnel action, could be a middle of the funnel action, could be a top of the funnel action. But you're able to measure that action. And that gives you the confidence that there is an element of engagement that is happening and not just plain awareness. In an impression-crazy world, please don't stop at measuring 1 plus reach. It is not enough. It is the starting point, but the most important point that makes your brand relevant is if, or ad relevant, is if your consumer is engaging with your message. There is nothing called trial. We keep measuring trial. The only thing that exists, and we've been discussing this more and more and more, as again, journeys are getting complex, new and new platforms are coming in. We can never be confident that because the consumer has tried us once, they're going to keep trying us again and again. So we are in a constant stage of trial. And hence, the only thing that matters is repeated trials. Those of you who are practitioners of laws of growth know this well. There is a long tail. It is about the infrequent, low user that you need to keep looking at because brand loyalty is dead, as many people will like to say it. Whether it is dead or not, it's a rhetorical topic. But the most important point is the fact that we cannot take our brand consumption for granted, even for one single month cycle or not even a 1 weekly cycle. So it's all about being in the stage of repeated trials. So whether you want to measure it as last 1 month penetration or an annual penetration, find your measure, but don't stop at trials. Repeats cannot be taken for granted unless you're very, very clear about the role your brand and your category is playing in the life of the consumer. And we saw some wonderful examples in Bino's session on how Maggie is trying to play a very, very clear role, not just as a snack or not just as a convenient meal, but something that helps the mothers in Vietnam. So trying to think about building your brand which serves a role, and the role does not necessarily mean a higher order purpose. It's very, very clear. There are different ways of measuring it. In the laws of growth lingo, it's called mental availability. When the consumer wants to consume your category or brand, does he remember your brand? So you can measure it in different ways, but it's not about just repeated consumption of your brand as being part of your consideration set, but it's about trying to measure the role your brand is playing in the consumer's life. And finally, I think world over, it's been a 5-year cycle. If you have not heard it already, I'm sure you'll hear it this year, that ROI is no longer a measure that people are chasing. ROI is necessary but not a sufficient condition, because especially in emerging markets, we are bottoming out on cost. And costs are going to start scaling up. We see classical platforms like Meta already see that. And we are now moving to newer platforms. It's just a journey of lower cost. We're chasing where the consumer is, and the consumer is also going where there is low cost. So my advocacy, of course, we will have a plan which will be optimized for cost. We're going to be participating in all platforms. We're going to keep the consumer at the heart of everything that we do, and we go where the consumer is. But as a brand practitioner and as a planner, the focus has to be on effectiveness and measuring effectiveness. I'm sure many of you are doing your market mix models. My advocacy will be in your market mix models, find out that input that drives top, not the bottom. So these are the 4 changes. I think these 4 changes are important, could possibly be a good starting point for us to reconsider or think about how we make our plans, how we think about our brands, how we think about our marketing. I also feel that for us to achieve this, it needs a pivot. And I think the pivot is to understand that it is all going to be boiling down to the way we think about our brands. And I think Binu's session gave us a lot of inspiration that we need to think about a meaningful human connection that our brands have with the consumers. We heard some very interesting stories about performance marketing, and those brands, categories, companies that have done performance marketing for the last 10 years are coming back to the realization it's the race to the bottom. The only way we will be able to differentiate and create sustainable competitive advantage is by building stronger, meaningful connections for our brands with the consumers. And once we have that, once we have the core identified for our brands, it's about how do we drive effective engagement. My advocacy, my urge, big brand owners here, please do not stop at messaging. Don't stop at many-to-one messages. Think about how you want to engage. What kind of response do you want from your consumers? And finally, it is about a relentless pursuit of trial. So that's really my reflection, my input to all of you in this great session. And this links in with the theme of the day today, which is about purpose-driven leadership. That finally, at the heart of good marketing is about the role that our brands play, and then how do we convert it into plans that work effectively in a very, very complex environment that our consumer is in today. Internally in Mondelez, we call it reimagining marketing. We started this journey 12 months back. And we have some great examples. I think we see some great examples. We saw some great examples today. We're really impressed by the work that's happening in the market. Heineken, Grab, Nestle, Coke, Pepsi, we see some great work. We're also very proud of the work that we are putting out. And again, giving you an example of, and I started my conversation saying I look back at what happened in TET. I think we have started to pivot when it comes to our big campaigns with the brand Kindo. And we are not happy by just putting out messages which are inspiring, but we want consumers to take action. We want consumers to respond to the messages that we're giving. We want to urge them to do something about the message that we're giving them. And all of this is linked to how we want them to feel during that event, whether it is TET, whether it is Mooncake. Because TET and Mooncake, as many of you know here, much better than me, is not just about buying and selling of gifts. It is a very, very important part of the Vietnamese culture, and we want to play the part of that culture. And as we're looking at the plans that we put out, our reflection is that it's working for us. Because we're not stopping at selling more, which we are. We are very happy to report that we're selling more. We still continue to be the face of Mooncake for Vietnam. We continue to be one of the most recognized brands during TET. But not only that, the response that we're getting from our consumers and the data that we're able to measure, the number of people who voted that they want a day off in Mooncake so that they can celebrate with their families, or the number of people who sent a special invite for people who could not travel back to celebrate TET with their families because they were not making enough money. So we're getting those proof points that tell us that we are engaging. We are measuring our growth and we are looking at our effectiveness of our communication. So just a small inspiration to end my talk. Thank you once again. I hope you got a sense of how we can take great brand value and leverage it in a complex media environment to succeed in today's times. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Anil, for suggesting a new metric of measuring the success